Welcome to the Social Behaviour Scrutiny Inquiry Panel. Welcome you all. Could we start off by asking for apologies of absence, please?
Sam Bennett and Matthew Jones.
We've got Sam Bennett and Matthew Jones. Any others? No? Okay. Any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests? No? Any prohibited of whip votes and declaration of party whips? No? Okay, we've got item 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Page 2. Okay. Could I have a proposal and second a true correct record, please?
I think Mike Day puts hand up then. Mike puts hand up.
I haven't got it.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah.
Terry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't here, sorry.
All right. I was, but I don't think I can propose a true record. Can I?
No, I think somebody else is it.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Jeffrey was there. Wasn't he? You were at the last meeting, Councillor Jeffrey.
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Oh.
24th of November. No.
Anyone at the last meeting who we are? Mary.
No, I definitely wasn't.
I wasn't.
Yeah. Okay. Don't worry.
Okay. So, going to item 4. I've got the minutes. Sorry, 2 pages of minutes. Oh, yeah. Right. So, these are your.
Yeah, don't worry. Let's move on. Just move on to the item. Yeah, item 5.
Yeah, item 5 then. Yeah. And that's cabinet report the cabinet member for well-being.
Public questions.
Or public questions. We haven't had any public questions as such. So we move on to item 6. And it'll be Alison first. Would you like to go first, Alison?
Chair, I'm struggling to hear you. I don't know why, but I am struggling. I don't know whether you're moving from the mic or whether the mic isn't great, or it could be my end, but I am struggling, I gotta be honest.
Oh.
I think you said it was me then, but I wasn't.
What's that?
So I apologize for not being there in person. If anyone don't realize, I've had an accident and been in hospital for a number of weeks. So I'm just online now for a number of months, unfortunately. But I'm going to ask Paul Thomas if he'll introduce it, Chair.
Is that better?
Sorry?
Is that better, Alison?
A little bit, but there's an awful echo to it. But we'll plod on, Chair. Don't worry. I'm going to ask Paul Thomas to introduce, mainly because I'm not firing on all cylinders. I'm sorry. So I'm here and I'll answer questions. But if the officer will introduce for me, I'd be grateful.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we're very new to this process with regard to a call for evidence, I'm not entirely sure what is expected of us and whether or not we're going to go through the report verbatim or whether or not we are going to pick out key points, because obviously we prepared an initial report which gave some significant background to antisocial behaviour, the process, those that are involved in dealing and managing with ASB, and then participate over the coming months in giving you links in with the broader partnership approach for you then to finalise a report. So I'll be guided by you, Chair, as to how you want us to progress with regard to the report that you have got in front of you now, because clearly there's a lot of information there and we can go from point to point if that is easier for everyone, and then pick up questions, but I'd be guided by you really as to how you want us to approach the report. Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, we're having problems with our echo. There we are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I've got no problem with you going through your report, Mr. Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Will do.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So I'll go through the questions as they've been set out in the report. Obviously, the first question was, what is the role of your service organisation in relation to tackling and reducing antisocial behaviour? In the report, we said there's not a specific council ASB team or service area. I just want to expand that a little bit. Housing do have their own antisocial behaviour team, which responds and manages all antisocial behaviour that's reported and all antisocial behaviour cases by council tenants. Myself, as my role as ASB Introduction Coordinator, sitting within their community safety team, which is under their community integration and partnerships, my role is to respond to all referrals that come through either one-on-one or via any of our statutory partner referral forms. So I kind of manage and coordinate the responses from all of our statutory partners under the Safer Swansea banner. So that could be anybody from the Youth Justice Service, South Wales Police, Local Health Board with Morrison Hospital, for example. And I also liaise and link in with every other council department and council agency with regards to how they're dealing with antisocial behaviour if they're already involved. So a perfect example is, if it's a housing tenant, I will link in directly with Dave Thomas's ASB team and work that way. But primarily my role is to ensure it's a coordinated response, and then I'm that link between all the various different departments and partner agencies. I'm a qualified crime prevention officer, and we apply crime prevention techniques such as target hardening locations, victim reassurance where appropriate. And we do all of this through what we call a multi-agency 4-step plan. That 4-step ASB process is throughout the whole of South Wales. Okay, so every one of our 7 local authorities and every single BCU, South Wales Police BCU, deal with antisocial behaviour the same 4-step process. So that is a warning letter at stage 1, or a couple of warning letters at stage 1. The stage 2 referral then escalates that process where we get more intervention involved. If it's a young person, for example, I link in with the Youth Justice Service, and with adults, we look at other organisations that may be already involved with them, especially if there's vulnerabilities and things like that have been identified. So our organisations like BARAD, our SV MARAC that we've got within the local authority, and those kind of things. Stage 3 then is what we call an ABC, acceptable behavioural contract, which is where we it's an informal contract of behaviour with us as organisations and that particular individual. So we can have prohibitions on there, so non-association kind of things, or we won't allow them in a certain area for a certain period of time, and up to positive, we make sure that we have at least 3 positive requirements in there as well with regards to how we want them to amend their behaviour. Now that could be positive requirements, could be ensuring that they continue with whatever link they've got with an organisation. So, for example, if there's intervention already going on with one of our alcohol and drug agencies, that positive requirement is in there for them to continue to do that and continue to engage with what we put in there. Because the bottom line is we deal with antisocial behaviour via early intervention and prevention. And the earlier we get in, the success rate increases with regards to how we reduce that antisocial behaviour. And the prevention side is how we get those interventions in place and what those interventions look like. And then the fourth stage then is our formal processes. Formal processes can take the form of injunctions. So they could be civil injunctions with housing or with the police. They could be criminal behaviour orders and the like. So that's pretty much what that 4-step process is as we go along. Any questions so far?
I was just wondering if there's been any sort of court cases regarding antisocial behaviour.
What, like case studies?
Yeah.
I haven't got a case study prepared, only because I know my colleagues in South Wales Police who are at the next step, they are actually going to provide a couple of case studies or 2 or 3 different case studies with how they've done that court side of things. I don't deal with criminal behaviour orders, it's led by the police. However, I have a heavy involvement in that preparation and that lead up. But I can think of one that's gone to court for a young person in particular, which is a criminal behaviour order, and he was 16. It happened a few years ago, pre-COVID. It finished quite early as well. It was 9 months, I think, it was finished at instead of the normal 12 months. But that is the only one I've been involved with, because that was a last resort. It's not something that we push towards, especially for young people, but even for adults for that matter. Like I said, it brings me back to that early intervention prevention. Me personally, if we get to stage 4, I think potentially we can look at ourselves harshly and say that we've potentially failed that individual somewhere along the line because we've had a lot of opportunity to work with them. But again, you're always going to get the odd case that's going to be like that anyway. But I'll allow the police to feed in a little bit more for the case studies, if that's all right, Chair, when they bring theirs along, because especially if it's got the same members here, I could be repeating, or they could be repeating the same kind of case studies, if that's okay.
Can I say that I'm well pleased about the early intervention working with young people? I think I mentioned it in the last meeting that we got something going up in Penderry with the police, Swansea City Football Club and wherever. And every Tuesday night, it fetches in about between 40 and 60 young people in, which is, average age 8 to 10, 12, which is a good age to fetch them in. So just to let you know, I fully support what you said about early intervention.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to take this opportunity as well, is that, antisocial behaviour isn't, and I appreciate what you're saying there, but I want to highlight for everybody else that it's not confined to young persons either. There's a lot of adults that we deal with regards to ASB, especially within the city centre, for example. But I like to use young persons as an example because, especially for that, because we're dealing with them at such a young age, we have a real opportunity to have a positive impact for those that are involved, But I'd like to say that it's not the majority of young people that cause antisocial behaviour either. It's a fair spread across the board of all age groups, and all backgrounds as well to a certain degree.
Can I also say here, Chair, as well, that it's also important to stress that if through the course of the work that Gareth and others identify additional safeguarding needs, that referral will go to the CMIT panel, of which Gareth and members of my team are part of that broader partnership. And it's important that people realise that the CMIT is not for us to refer ASB into. But what we will do, though, is, as I've said, is that if there are additional safeguarding markers there that we identify through that initial engagement, then it is an opportunity for us to make that referral into CMIT so that there is more of a partnership approach in addressing some of the safeguarding issues.
I appreciate that. And just for information, I was one of the ones that actually over antisocial behaviour many years ago. 15 of us made statements and turned up in court and the people who was causing the trouble, they had no alternative but to plead guilty because of the amount of evidence that had been collected by Safer Swansea Partnership and the residents. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, come on, just me, there was 15 of us. We actually won the gold award, the Respect Agenda, which I think it was one of the politicians, better not go mentioning names, some people won't like it, but yeah, so I understand the process of, of it. And of course, when you say for other issues, older people, younger people, as you know yourself, one of the biggest issues at the moment going around the city seems to be, the off-road bikes. But that's something we will take up with when the police are here, I should imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were, there's just on that note, as you've mentioned it, Chair, there is an off-road working group that's been set up, a cross-agency working group now that's been set up to tackle that across the whole of South Wales. And my colleague who works in the Community Safety Department, Paul Evans, he's heavily involved in that as a representative from our department within that, along with the local police, the fire service, and various other different agencies as well. But just to cover that off without going off on a tangent too much at this early point.
But it's still very good information for people like myself and other councillors and members of the public, because I weren't aware of it. And I work with Mr. Simon Trick, who's a senior police officer up with us in Penderry. I can't speak for other areas, as you know, but I understand that, yeah.
Yeah, it's in its very early stages, just to highlight that for everybody. In fact, it's literally just been set up now. It's been in the working for the last 6 or 7 months, and there's been various different groups set up to see how best to go forward with that. And I think that's going to get formalised now within the next month anyway to go forward with it. But Paul's got more details on that.
And of course, the fire authority, many years ago, had their own off-road bikes. And I believe when they stop using them, they pass them on to people who delivers blood and whatever around the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where were we? Right. So yeah. So just on that, with our service and organisation, I think we're just to cover off on the last paragraph there with regards to the community education and partnership team, which I work under. Paul's my team, my manager. We carry out the public engagement and information events throughout the year, which all of our partners attend. All the statutory partners attend every single one, and a lot of third sector agencies, a lot of voluntary agencies that turn up for that as well as part of that engagement, where we try to give out as much information as we possibly can, not just on antisocial behaviour, but what we do as a service area anyway. And we also have representatives on every single police-led problem-solving group. So there's 5 of them throughout the 5, am I right? I think it's 5, yeah. There's 5 of them that I sit on, my colleague Paul Evans sits on, to ensure that we've got that continuation of evidence gathering, monitoring, reporting and problem solving. Again, they don't deal just with ASB, they deal with various other different topics as well, but that's how we liaise, link in and do that problem solving approach.
Can I also just mention there that every opportunity that we have when we are engaging with the public, we seek to ask them to complete questionnaires. So we're collating at the moment feedback from the Christmas Chalet, from White Ribbon Day, from a number of other events that we facilitated leading up to Christmas, so that we get an idea of what the perception is from the public with regard to crime, how they feel, and maybe where we can improve if we can. So at every opportunity, we try to engage with those that are attending events or passing through, to enable us really to plan and put in place then that early intervention, be it projects, be it different ways of working.
So moving on to question 2, if you want me to, Chair.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So how are you addressing the 5 key principles in your organisation? So I just want to just quickly explain about the five principles. This is still under consultation. We want to introduce it with regards to the scrutiny panel, so that to make you all aware of what's on the horizon and what the approach is from the Home Office to try and get us to be to ensure that everybody throughout the UK is working towards the same goal, using the same structure, if you like, of utilising that as an organisation. Now, the answer is being strategic board is chaired by the Home Office. It brings together a range of partners and representatives from relevant agencies and government departments. And the idea is to work together to identify and assess strategic issues, including relating to ASB, but share good practice, share information in order to have an effective multi-agency response to antisocial behaviour. So we attended a Home Office working group where we had a tabletop exercise, and we all split off. So we were all the local authorities represented in Wales, as well as across the whole of England as well, across the whole of the UK. And these 5 principles were the ones that we were working on, and how we can develop them. Now, what I want to highlight is, because in the consultation process, these aren't embedded anywhere yet. However, we wanted to use that at this early stage as a way, and because scrutiny has come up at the same time, is that by the time these principles are in place, the scrutiny panel would have finished. So if I didn't mention it now, it would be something new after this that you wouldn't be aware of. So it's just to let you know that we don't know how it's going to look yet, but we're a major part of that consultation phase, which we were represented, and we have had a lot of input into as well. And it covers everything, as you can see there. It's victim-led, obviously. How we communicate, how we deal with antisocial behaviour across the board. And that includes how it's investigated, because a lot of us as organisations are probably not as good as we can be for that. We're great at stats, we're very good at publicising things when asked, but probably not as good as we should be proactively of showing the intricacies of maybe how we investigate and keeping people aware of the progress that's going on. Unless you're the victim, which is a primary focus. If you're involved in the outskirts of that particular ASB, like for example, ASB, environmental ASB. So we've got a particular hotspot location. I'll use the Sutton bus station as an example. Only and where we are in the stages and phases of dealing with that particular. With a specific victim, it's totally different. They're involved and kept in touch. So this is what these principles are. This particular principle, the idea behind that is that we can improve on that, and how we improve on that. The third one is agencies and practitioners who work across boundaries, and they're very wordy, right? Okay, I don't know if you've all got this in front of you, okay, but to identify, assess, and tackle ASB and its underlying causes. Referral pathways should be clearly set out between services and published locally. So these are the things that hopefully, once they're put into practice in the next 5 to 6 months, we will have an idea of how we're going to do that, and how we're going to do that cross-border with all the statutory partners. These principles aren't intended to hinder local policy, local decision making, but it's more as a guide in how we deliver the best possible outcomes for victims of antisocial behaviour. Because the bottom line with ASB, we're victim-led. That is my primary responsibility, is to the victims rather than anything else. So, everything under the ASB legislation is tailored to that for statutory partners. So the principles are designed to be used by us involved in tackling ASB. So that's the local authorities, community safety partnerships, police forces, fire, housing associations, and various others as well.
Could I just come in there, because
yeah,
I've read some of the report and what you're saying. It just reminds me a bit like the principles on safeguarding.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing across the board with the Home Office. They find a strategy and a process that works for one thing, and then applying it and modifying it for other things. So it's a bit like what's the domestic violence stuff is very similar. Yeah, it's very similar thing to that as well. So
I think, Chair, that the thinking behind it was that I think once they're ratified and agreed, I think it'll help us then with establishing some sort of performance framework, because if we work to those principles, then we can then measure whether or not we're being successful in communicating, in addressing some of the issues. So apologies if it may have confused it and I've jumped the gun and set the hair running, but I think that they're good, and I think that we can use them and adopt them once agreed to enable us to sort of measure how we are actually performing against those key principles.
Well, I'll jump the gun a little bit now, and could I fetch in for the question? I believe it's Jane Whitmore.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thanks. I just want just in terms of the principles, because obviously we're the first department to come forward in terms of the evidence gathering sessions, and the set of questions have been sent out to everyone. So this question was around the principles, as Paul and Gareth have described, but I just think about some of the other organisations that will come forward as part of us in terms of the sessions that are planned. We might need to tell them what those principles are, otherwise they're probably going to struggle to answer that question, because they are very new. So it's just a side that the panel may want to just to think about once when they're sending out for the other people to come and give their evidence, because they are very, very new, so they might not be able to answer that question otherwise as you come forward. So it's just something to think about, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, we will look at that. Thank you very much. And I believe, Alison, would you like to come in now, Alison, then before we go back to the
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I struggling to hear today. I don't know why, but I just want to say, you know, based on what the officers were just saying and Jane was talking about, really, that you know, there's lots of organisations work together here. This really is, you know, multi-agency working, and every agency will have its own sort of policies, procedures, and everything. But you know, these principles will apply to which and everything, but it does give us that bit of glue between everybody. But I can't stress enough that whichever question you're asking, anything about ASB, like Gareth said earlier, is not just about young people, it's all ages, it's multiple organisations working together and following everybody through from start to finish, you know, so that the person is supported and worked with throughout. So I just wanted to sort of say about those agencies, really, Chair. Thanks.
Just to say, and I think we've seen some of that up at the top of High Street, that kind of work. I'll go back to the Gareth Pritchard and Mr. Thomas, if you like. Yes, no, that's it.
Thank you, Chair. And just on the back of those comments by Jane and by Councillor Pugh, I can highlight the fact that, for example, when the Youth Justice Service would be doing theirs, I mean, I've already spoken to the prevention coordinator, because they won't necessarily be aware of those 5 principles yet, because they're still in the consultation phase. So they wouldn't have gone to the Home Office thing. You know, me and Paul have gone there as representatives of the local authority. And again, it's a guide and not to hinder local decision making. So there's a lot of the questions on here that would be relevant, majority of them to me, but 50% of them won't be relevant to the police and relevant to other departments and agencies. So it's just that those principles are going to be the only 2 agencies that are going to know about these 5 principles are us and the local police. So just to cover that off there, and you know, without me banging on about the same sort of thing that you already mentioned, but just want to highlight that as well. So question 3: what are the key challenges you're facing, and how are you addressing these, and what more can be done to help you to address them? The biggest thing for me is resilience. We're a tiny team. At the moment, it's just me, so it doesn't get any smaller. I'm only 5'5", but it's because it's just me dealing with that. I do have an admin support officer. She's been on maternity leave for the last 9 months. She comes back next month. I'm thankful for. But with regards to the decision-making process, it sits with me, and you know, I can look and quote other local authorities and the size of their teams, but it's different from area to area. But that's my biggest challenge, I suppose, for myself, because we're externally funded as well, and the onus and the the elevated importance of antisocial behaviour and how we deal with it isn't always met by the resources that we've got as well, which we know are limited and going to be limited again even more going forward over the next couple of years. But I thought for this, for this forum, it's important to highlight that. I think we mentioned it in the last meeting, the last time we all met as well. And it does have an impact then on how we can, plan ahead, certainly from projects and things like that. And I'll give a good example, and it will cover one of the other questions as well with regards to engagement and that further on. But we have something, a nationwide antisocial behaviour awareness week, a bit like Hate Crime Week and the various other different weeks that we as statutory partners promote and uphold throughout the year. On that ASB Awareness Week, there's an onus on all the statutory partners to promote it through social media, promote it through events and things like that. And as well as I do, having an event, organising an event is one thing, getting people to attend is something totally different, and it is resource intensive. And whereas I could go back 10, 15 years ago, we used to do community engagement events for Safer Swansea, and we'd have a budget to do those sorts of things. I don't have a budget. I don't have a budget for antisocial behaviour. There isn't one. The resource and funding is for my role and the ability to basically carry out my role through that, and that's pretty much it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there with that phone ringing. But I suppose, I suppose that's it really. I don't need to harp on that point too much with regards to having that kind of thing.
You're funded for antisocial behaviour. Can we, as an inquiry panel, working group, help in any way?
Are you asking me, Chair? Sorry.
Yes. You're saying there's no funding for antisocial behaviour except for what comes out of the housing revenue account. I was wondering if this group could actually help in any way about this funding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether Jane wants to.
Do you want me to answer that one? Do you want that,
yes,
Gareth?
please.
I think in terms of a recommendation and report, it would be around how we need to look at the things in a whole and understand how we can bring things together to add value. So there's different forms of grant funding that goes all over the round for community engagement, for community safety. There's different forms of money and duties that's coming from the Home Office and the Police and the Crime Commissioner's Office. So it's understanding what the whole picture is and how we can work smarter and sort of organise ourselves out to be a bit more resilient as we go forward. So and it's something that obviously this session's just looking at our community safety partnership and the community integration team, and it's something that we have started to look at to understand how we can build some more resilience going through. So a recognition of resilience and how we need to work smarter together, I think from the panel would be really helpful, Chair.
Alison?
Yeah, along the same roads really. ASB, like lots and lots of other projects, Dave's here today, the poverty team, all grant funded. So many projects with 1 year funding. The same. That awful experience for staff come after Christmas. Have they got a job come April the 1st? Even though lots of these projects have been running for a long time, it is grant dependent, and the insecurity is there. We very much rely on, like Jane just said, grants coming in through other avenues within the same team, and we piggyback onto lots of these things. But Chair, in an ideal world, then obviously there would be needed to be more money and more engagement. But so any recommendation is going to be, I suppose, gratefully received. But it is an issue when you are reliant on Home Office grants or everything. We would like to go now CMB, and we have been given confirmation, I think, that they will go to 3-year sort of cycles, maybe up to 5, which will give more longevity. Do you know what I mean? But up until now, it's been very difficult.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this discussion at the moment is probably one of the critical issues, isn't it, in relation to what we're doing as an inquiry committee is not leading to look at operational aspects of it, but more importantly in terms of what the current arrangements are for the partnership arrangements where antisocial behaviour is at the centre of it, and what recommendations we can bring forward for consideration for the future. Clearly, I think the comments have been made in connection with resources, and I think they're all very important. And what Alison just said is part of that issue. I was surprised in the report that as before us today that there's reference to the fact that as far as the police are concerned, they only give annual commitments as far as provision for resources here, whereas most public sector organisations work on at least a medium-term financial plan and provide 3-year elements. Though when we talk to the police, I'm not sure whether the individuals that we'll be able to talk to are those responsible for making those sorts of decisions, but whether there should be some sort of question put to the Police and Crime Commissioner about the need for 3-year financial plan, so at least we got that element of certainty, because as has been commented on, officers are spending maybe 9 months doing the job, but then 3 months wondering about putting in applications for funding from elsewhere. So that seems to be a very critical thing. The other one which we need to be able to focus on is not just thinking in terms of what other agencies need to be doing, but also asking other organisations that we call for evidence to tell us if there are ways in which we as a council could be improving our working to ensure that this whole process of antisocial behaviour is tackled properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'll go back to Gareth, is it? Or would you like to carry on now, Gareth?
Sorry, Jane.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just to come back on Councillor Day's point, you're absolutely right. That for the next session with the police, it's probably not the right group of people in terms of funding, because it does come from the Police and Crime Commissioner's office. But it is worth making that point. And I know that they are really looking at it, and it does tie in with their cycle of priorities and elections in terms as well. But I think that it has been for many years, year on year, that but something that would be helpful if it had some kind of longevity. Sorry, Chair. Thanks. Go on, Gareth.
I suppose just not to dwell on it too much, but I mean the harsh reality is, if you look further in the report, on average it's 900 incidents a year. If you remove Gareth, who's going to actually then manage that within a local authority context? And I'll just leave that out there.
Yeah. I just to move away slightly from from role specific funding, from my perspective, the biggest to be hamstrung when we've got no means of progressing ASB cases. I suppose from my perspective, it's that resource. It's as important as my role, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't sacrifice my role, but just to say that outside of the HRA, so council tenants, and I've said it in the report, the HRA deals with all that enforcement. So if they want to take up an injunction, they have their legal team, they do all of that. On the wider scope, for the rest of our residents within the city and county of Swansea, if there's antisocial behaviour, how do we deal and how do we escalate the process with them? And we're quite heavily reliant on the police process and their partnership approach with the 4-step process then. So, we're looking at CPNs, CPW, CBOs, which I lean on them a lot with regards to leading on those, on those sorts of issues, as opposed to us as ourselves. If we've got a council resident causing antisocial behaviour, yes, I can do all the informal stuff. That's absolutely fantastic. But if they breach it, I've got no budget, legal team, case file prep, and all the rest of it. Get the statements and go to court to prosecute and serve the civil injunction. Again, just to highlight for the panel, this is not unique to Swansea either. Okay, it's across the whole 7 local authorities have similar issues outside of their housing departments. And I think it's just because the way the legislation has been devised, because majority of local authorities throughout the whole of the UK aren't council owned anymore. There's very few that are. So you know, you've got a lot of private housing organisations running housing stock, and they, within that organisation, they have their own legal teams, they have their own lawyers there and everything else. So just to touch on that as well, and just to highlight that part of the report as well.
And as I said in the last meeting with the private tenants, we've often gone to the Environmental Protection Act, you know, targeting the landlord, not the tenants, and then it's up to the landlord to do something about his tenants. We've used that in the past.
Yeah, and with private tenants, that's great. I mean, I'm more thinking along the lines of as well private residents, homeowners, and private homeowners when we've got where we don't have that legal support to be able to take out, you know, injunctions or things like that because they're not housing tenants. I suppose that's what I wanted to highlight more than anything else. We do have mediation. I'm a qualified mediator as well, so through early intervention, by providing that mediation service to everybody who's not a council tenant, because the housing office, the housing department, utilise their own mediation services anyway. So I got trained up as a mediator to provide the same service to all of our private residents, where that's more appropriate. So the idea being, again, we don't want to get the formal anyway, but it's just not having that. I hate to use the word, but that's stick and carrot. We don't have the stick sometimes where we have lots of carrots, kind of thing, you know. But
and some of these housing associations are very big now, aren't they?
Now, housing associations again have their own legal department. Yeah, they have their own legal department. So, you know, if you're a Pobl resident, all your ASB is referred, or majority of your ASB is referred through them anyway, and they would take the lead on with their ASB processes, taking up their own civil injunctions and things like that as well. So moving on to question 4, how are you engaging with the public events? I think we covered that. I think we touched on that very early on, but you know, as we said, we do a lot of community events. I think we've done 16, sorry. You'll see at the end of the report in the appendices a couple of examples of the various different media stuff that my colleague Beth Thomas did to highlight the work that was done. Mentioned the fact that event, as much of an event as it is, it's a vehicle for surveys, questionnaires, where we can ask that particular community, what are your issues? What can we do? What can we do well? What are we doing well? What can we do better? What do you need? What do you want? And then we look back, then we come back from that, collate that information and feed that into the relevant departments within the local authority to ascertain and to identify where they can do that provision. I won't read the rest of that. I think, you know, I mentioned the annual ASB Awareness Week, the multi-agency events and social media campaigns that we do. But yeah, I suppose the other engagement bit on there that we also do is we support South Wales Police with the op perception events that they do, which is, again, where they identify a specific problem that's escalated in a particular area, they will carry out what they call op perception, which is they link up with a couple of housing officers, myself, Paul Evans, and we'll go out to that very small, you know, that particular targeted area of that community, and we'll do a door knocking exercise, speak to residents, and again, very similar sort of thing to what we did with our engagement events. Don't get me wrong, we're not talking about, you know, go to the same people, asking to fill out 10 or 12 different questionnaires. These questionnaires are all married up, so we're asking the same questions in different areas to treat different particular issues or target different particular issues as well. Our engagement events that we did, the 16 I mentioned, were a very general questionnaire targeted at those sort of areas. We also got the PSGs, which we feed into those questionnaires and those results. And we also make sure that, as I say, we consult when we're doing different questionnaires, so there's no duplication between statutory partners when we're carrying them out. Excuse me.
Yeah. Could I just mention Councillor Fogarty, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the events. Picking up on your comment earlier about put on a fantastic event and getting people to them can sometimes be a challenge. Do you always organise your own kind of bespoke events, or do you ever go where there are already things happening? Perhaps town community councils are running something, or a third sector organisation locally. Kind of does that work better in some instances?
I mean, yeah, all of the above, Councillor. I mean, the initial, the 16 events that we're specifically talking about were a result of the disturbance in May Hill and the request then for us to look at hosting and running events across Swansea. Any of that without that additional grant funding. That was on a sort of a needs basis, so that wasn't just on a whim or the a local ward member who spoke louder than anyone else. That was based on sort of stats and data, also some of the perceptions that may have happened over the previous 6 months. So that helps then inform where we would deliver those events. We would then engage through social media, through Safer Swansea social media platforms, through LACs, and anyone else with regard to those that have a vested interest. So key were ward members. So we made sure that ward members were aware and promoted through their particular social media outlets. Yes, we did also then work with other agencies who may be delivering specific events, the emergency services of annual events, which we support, which I believe is either hosted at the Phoenix Centre, Penlan, but also then if ward members were running fetes or local events through the course of the summer, I think Scrutiny in particular was one that we supported. We're open to it. If we can do it, we're not frightened of working at weekends as well. We do work weekends and we do work late hours. So yeah, I mean, it's on a needs basis, but if we can support a local event by turning up and providing some sort of advice and guidance and support as to what we do, why we do it, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I think on the back of that as well, it's important that it's not just big scale events that we attend either, or try to develop ourselves, even down to local PCSOs. We're going to have something set up somewhere, a tabletop in the quadrant. If they want our community safety team to be representative there, then one of us will attend that as well. So we have that cross-state multi-agency supporting each other as well, if there's a requirement. If we get an invite, or if we made aware of it. And again, that all comes out a lot of the time through our problem-solving groups, through direct contact, because myself and Paul Evans have pretty much every single PCSO in the city of Swansea has our direct email. So whether it's community safety, crime prevention, and social behaviour, and anything that has the word safety in it, guaranteed they'll email us first to see, can you come along to this? Can you provide us with that? What advice do you have on that? So, and it's not just antisocial behaviour, because in fairness with the local authority, with the police, what we try to do is not duplicate either. So if I've got 2 local PCSOs that I know are doing an event and they're leading on antisocial behaviour, which is a large a lead on what they do within the community, then I won't go there as well. So you've got 3 people talking about ASB. Paul will go there and provide crime prevention advice, neighbourhood watch, how to join neighbourhood watch, all that sort of thing. And that all encompasses ASB, I know, but specifically for this panel. So that was a very long yes answer to your question.
I think also, just to highlight a very good example, was that both Gareth and Paul identified a number of years ago that with the Christmas market and the chalets there, it would be an opportunity for us to have a chalet to do engagement work. And I think that's been really successful. The first year it was a bit clunky, it was a bit sort of much, a lot of police in uniform standing there sort of expecting people to approach them. I think we've evolved from that, and now actually, because of the work we do through CMET, because of the work we do through the SD Marac, because of the Safer Swansea, it's now actually supported by a number of agencies that provide a lot of good work to those that need it. So people like Barod, our Evolve team with young people, and they use it as a base. So through that sort of end of November through to Christmas, that there was a huge opportunity for that engagement, some activity. I think Beth ran some opportunities to make Christmas decorations, but at the same time, we're also doing that engagement and asking those questions.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah, could I fetch in Alison Pugh again, please?
Only just for Rebecca, really, to know that in the summer, in my ward in Llansamble, we always do holiday hunger events, and we disguise them by doing, you know, activities. And, you know, to be fair, the community safety, the, you know, all the play team, lifelong learning, poverty team, everybody in, and everybody comes, and you know, there was children everywhere in Llansamble ward with community safety bags and all the freebies that the staff had to give out. So they will come, and if you give people time and notice, then they'll do their best to come and at all the events to get the information out there. You know, so don't be afraid to ask.
We've always used the carnivals and our fun days and Christmas parades. You know, we do a very similar thing, and I know the fire authority do. It turns up to carnivals and the fun days. It even goes up to the Royal Welsh Show, and they have some massive audience up there with people coming through from all parts of Wales. So yeah, carnivals and fun days. You can enjoy yourself, but at the same time, you can collate a lot of information at the same time.
Yeah,
and people are more relaxed than they.
That's kind of where my question comes from, because over the summer there was one of these the events ran in Mumbles that I went to, and it wasn't amazingly well attended for the hour or so I was there, but you know, it was a bit of a missed opportunity, because that same week we'd had a really successful family fun, exactly what you're describing, and if we just put the two events together, you'd have had 100 kids. So it's like learning from those sort of slightly ships in the night moments, I think.
Yeah, and in fairness, on the back of that, you know, once we evaluated what worked well in what area, because not all events were attended fantastically well. Some were amazing, some not so amazing, but it was important that we would see, you know, that for us to be in each area at some point. But I think you're quite right. We had to arrange a lot of these in a very short space of time as well. I'm not, you know, so there were missed opportunities. You're quite right. And going forward next year with a little bit more forward planning and looking in diaries and seeing what's going to be made available, then we can link in where and when we can when we're doing these sorts of events. So totally agree with Councillor. It could have been, it was a missed opportunity, that was. And probably the weather didn't help that much either, because majority of people wanted to be down there, you know, down the swimming pool, down the front on a scorcher. It was a bit too hot to be in Underhill Park, I think, on that particular day. But again, we were servants to the weather.
I think also it's a very good point to make, Councillor, as well, because we won't have the money to be able to deliver those events. So if at a local level you are going to organise events, then please get in touch with us, because we will support them.
Yeah.
And I've already got it penciled in for one year coming up in the summer, which is the Scrutiny Ragged Youth Football Club, which got 300 members, and the parents come along, and so does the grandparents. So it's could be a big turnout. So I've already got it penciled in. Once I got the date.
Okay, you know, the next few questions, there's a few things I want to highlight and point out and focus on. Other stuff, you know, there's like, for example, you know, question 5 now, we've got what information is available. We have a website. There's certainly things that can be done better on that website. There's a lot of information on there on how to report antisocial behaviour, who does what and where, kind of thing. But, you know, we use social media, so say for Swansea, through the Twitter page. But what isn't as good on there is maybe when I've looked, and I've done a little bit of research in other areas where maybe it says case studies, the annual statistics can be going on there going forward. And these are just things that we've identified now through scrutiny, and it's helped us focus a little bit as to what we can improve on. And especially with regards to our community trigger applications and outcomes. A lot of information as well will obviously support the local authority in dealing with cutting down on freedom of information requests as well, by putting a lot more information on there. But that's probably something that can be improved on, that I've not focused my attention on probably in the last couple of years with regards to that side of things.
And everything, we've got a confidential information line as well, where people can report things confidentially to Councillor.
No, I mean, it's crimes. Anything confidential, it's best used. We promote Crime Stoppers for that, because it's anonymous and can be reported anonymous. It's very difficult to report to a statutory organisation an anonymous report, because as a statutory organisation, we have a duty to act upon it. So it's very difficult to act upon anything that's anonymous, whereas Crime Stoppers feed into us as organisations.
I don't mean it that way. What I mean is, somebody can come on the phone and give you information on the phone. They probably give you names, but you keep the names confidential.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
I know that it works because I know people that's actually did it. That's why I mentioned it.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Chair. Yes, yeah, no, absolutely sorry. I misheard what you said. Right. So question 6 was a difficult one for me to answer because it says, do you feed back to the victims, reporters of antisocial behaviour? Well, the simple answer to that is no, I don't, because that's not my role. As I said, the individual, my role is to coordinate all the responses to ensure that the different, not ensure, but is to make sure there's a joint approach, basically. So when somebody rings 101, they report that, an occurrence is created, and there's a response. I respond with regards to warning letters and all that side of it. The police respond initially to the victim and to the RP. Now, that can come to me as a victim letter, so I'll send a victim letter out. But the progress and the whole victim process is led by the police. They will do what they call a repeat interventions with regards to increased police patrols, more door knocks for that particular victim, keep them updated on their case and all that. So it's led by that particular organisation. If it's housing, it's the housing officer that does all of that. So me personally and the Community Integration and Partnerships team don't deal with reporters of antisocial behaviour and victims of antisocial behaviour directly. We deal with the process of how we reduce, how we comply with the early intervention prevention process, if that makes sense. Okay, but that question, it'll be specifically what organisations do on when it's their turn to speak to yourself. So when the police speak to you next month now, and youth justice and people like that, because they deal with the individuals themselves as well a lot of the time. On data, there's a lovely little bar graph there for you. What I've done there, not with the bar graph so much, but just to give you an overview of figures, the total number of ASB referrals, and I just did January to December last year. I could have gone back 3 years and then stood done a cross-referencing of what was where. But because we had COVID, a lot of those figures are going to be very, very skewed. I won't go into the reasons why, but it's the way it was recorded. COVID breaches were recorded as antisocial behaviour, just to put it like that. So there was probably 300% increase of antisocial behaviour reported during lockdown, because if you went to visit your mother and you shouldn't have been, that was antisocial behaviour apparently. So it skewed a lot. I was dealing with probably 100 reports of antisocial behaviour every day that I had to go through case by case to see what was actual antisocial behaviour and what was a COVID breach. So that's why I did January to December 2022, to give you an idea and give you a flavour of the quantity that we deal with throughout the year. So out of those ASB referrals, there's 2 types of referrals that we get in: perpetrator known, perpetrator unknown. I know there's a little thing there which says over half were already known within the system. That's an error in what I put in the report. That is not actually what that means. Perpetrator known is people that are identified at the scene. Okay, so we can deal with them directly through letters, interventions, whatever it may be. A prevention process that we can put in place. However, perpetrator unknown, as you can see, there's probably 30% there of perpetrator unknown are going to be where somebody reported antisocial behaviour. Whoever was causing the ASB has gone by the time anybody's attended, or the perpetrators weren't recognised, identified at the time or at any later stage. Okay, so we commonly utilise the perpetrator unknown referral form, or officers do, as what we call an area referral. And all that means is, and again, I wouldn't use that as an example again. I'll use, I don't know, a park, anywhere in the city for that matter, where we've got reports of vandalism, graffiti, off-road biking, whatever it may be. We don't know who's doing it, but we get a lot of reports about that particular location. A perpetrator unknown referral is done because that helps us identify a hotspot of ASB. How do we deal with it? What do we need to do? So do we need to target harden? Do we need to increase patrols? And that target hardening can be everything from cutting back overgrowth. That could be increasing street lighting or lighting in that particular park and things like that. So that's how we monitor and identify either people that have been identified, recognised, or if it's a location that we need to target harden and do our crime prevention, utilise our crime prevention techniques to help minimise, prevent, and improve that particular area. Yeah, I think.
And I think the NSU actually does some of that work as well, don't they?
Yeah, we liaise with them, as you know, Chair. Yeah, we link in directly with all housing aspects of housing, including the neighbourhood support unit, especially within council tenant areas, and the police link in directly with the NSU, doing the whole investigative process as well, as and when it's necessary. And that could be anything from noise disturbances on the outset, right the way up to specific criminal offences as well that we may deal with as ASB at a certain point. Also with those, I'm sorry.
Could I get Chair Rebecca, Councillor Poverty in, please? I believe she wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was going to ask about how our figures compared to previous years. It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it, that has skewed the figures so much. But yeah, I guess it's just a point really that it would be helpful, wouldn't it, to know kind of, is there a trend? Is it increasing, decreasing? I just wondered whether you could expand a little bit on the fact that the numbers of youth at the various stages are quite a lot higher than adult. What kind of drives that? And then I suppose really what's important is what would drive its reduction. Is it reflecting cuts to youth services, for example, or anything like that?
Just to answer your first question, although I haven't included previous years because of COVID, there's a general consensus of opinion across the whole of the UK. ASB has increased since COVID for various different reasons, but I think overall it's probably been about 25-30% increase in antisocial behaviour reported. Now that can be because reporting's got better, and this is not in Swansea necessarily. This is across the whole of the UK, but also that impact of multiple lockdowns, and that all of a sudden everybody's let out, and so that's a massive indicator on that as well. Coming to your, not quite sure. Sorry, just to clarify about the high figures of youth. Are you looking at the percentages that I put down underneath the table? Is that what you're talking about, the 72% of youth first warnings and that sort of stuff, or?
No, so the adult stage 1 first warning is 45, but then if you look at the youth in the table at the bottom of page 7.
Yes, right. Okay, so what I've done there, I just, in the amount of letters that we've issued in that particular, during that 1 year, it's a numerous amount of reasons. A lot of we don't get as many ASB referrals. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Our adult stage 1 letters, and I don't know how to explain this really. It's just, why are there more youth stage 1? They probably had more referrals in that particular year for youth related antisocial behaviour. That's a simple answer. I haven't actually broken down. I don't think I broke down the amount of perpetrator loans from.
I think Jane Whitmore come in on this.
No, I didn't. I
think,
break down that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gareth. I think, on reflection, looking at the data, I think it probably would be helpful. So we have 932 occurrences in the year. We probably should have actually broken that down with how many are adults and how many are young people, because then that would account for how the stage 1, stage 2s, and you could understand it more. Because what I wouldn't want to guess what the data is telling us without having that looking at it, but it'd probably be explored in further sessions. But I think that what you'll find is that there's more action that's taken on younger people in terms of early intervention and prevention, and Julie's going to help me out, than there is on adults. So I think that's what it's telling us. But me and Gareth and Paul we'll pick it up and have just a good look at that, just to understand exactly, rather than me setting guess. Sorry, Julie.
Sorry, before Julie comes in, just to highlight for you, councillor, as well, is that a lot of adults related antisocial behaviour, the adult stage 1 first warnings, there's more. I'll give you an example. We have a lot of adult referrals for the city centre, okay, ASB referrals, where they wouldn't have a stage 1 letter. So, for example, I'll utilise begging as an example, okay? The police will put in ASB referrals for begging. I'll get a lot of them on a daily basis, especially more on a weekly basis. None of those will be a stage 1 warning letter because a warning letter isn't appropriate to deal with begging. What they will have is SV merit referrals. There'll be other interventions rather than a stage 1 warning letter. With young persons, which I'll allow Julie to expand on what we've got, there's other early intervention that goes there, but we utilise the warning letter with a young person because the whole point of the stage 1 warning letter is to let mum and dad know what that young person was doing at that point, to let them deal with it. It's replaced the old Bobby knocking on the door, grabbing me by my ear, taking me back to dad and saying, you see what Gareth was doing down at Chippy last night? Deal with him rather than anything else. And that accounts for that 72% success rate of not repeat offending. With adults, I'll be honest with you, letters don't have the same impact, and we look at adults as being responsible for their own behaviour. So if we can intervene, provide that support with regards to begging and that, but with adults, we look at a lot of other things as well. The forced sale process is the same, but I think that probably skews the figures a little bit from that parameter. But Jane's quite right. I could have broken down those figures into youth and adult perpetrator known referrals as well. Sorry, Julie.
Please mention Judy Davison. So, okay, right. All right, Judy Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points is that what Gareth said is we do have a different infrastructure and support mechanism for under 18-year-olds. So I think it's quite well tried and tested, and the multi-agency dimensions that has strengthened. Certainly, the time that I've been in Swansea, just over 2 years, I think there's a lot of evidence of that. And the legislation around under 18s and 18 plus, as quite rightly said, is very different. So that would account for the difference in the numbers of warning letters that are shown on pages 7 and 8. The other thing I just wanted to say is that there hasn't been any cuts in youth service. There may have been quite a few years ago, but there's been investment in youth services in Swansea, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months. So I just wanted that to be clear, is that I didn't want there to be a misconception that there's been any cuts to youth services in Swansea.
Thanks, Julie. I am probably referring to many years back now.
They think usually the persons we kept doing youth services.
Can I just come back? You
come in then, and then I'll fetch in Councillor Alan Jeffrey.
You just said as well is that because of all of that intervention and support, 69% of youth final warnings do not escalate. A lot of the time, it's because youth services are already involved, and it's that good work and that early intervention prevents that escalation going onwards, going forward, because we work so closely with the youth services and child and family services. We have monthly meetings with them. I sit down with the prevention coordinator, and we have a plan. We set up what we're going to do with each individual that's on that radar, and what can we do if they're open services, great. If they're not, appropriate referrals where necessary are done as well.
Councillor Alan Jeffrey.
Sorry, you're on mute, Councillor.
Oh, mute.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gareth, Paul, for clarity in addressing those questions. Just an arbitrary question related to what we've just been talking about. It's basically addressing that one point in your question 2. I know I'm going back a bit, but it is a little bit related. And that point 5 about adults and children who exhibit ASB should, if I just refer to it, I should have the opportunity to take the responsibility to repair the harm that's caused by it. Do you have any sort of examples of how that would be done, apart from the policeman sort of giving the clip behind the ear and sending them back to mum and dad? But
yeah,
but how would they go about doing that?
There's a lot of different processes involved. We have, and the police can. It's a good question for the police, and I'm sure Julie's going to come in on a load as well. But we have that community resolution, so restorative justice approaches, and I'll cover off just on the adult side of things, if you like. There's opportunities to apply a restorative justice approach, which is a reparation, if you like, at the first instance. And I don't want to step on Julie's toes, so I'm sure Julie's going to mention how it's dealt with from a young person's approach as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So yeah, as Gareth said, we very much take what's called a restorative approach in children's services. So where there are incidents at that level, and sometimes at a higher level as well, in terms of where their matter may be before the court, we do talk to the victim who and their family, where their children, and offer that conversation. And then we bring the parties together. It's very sensitive, it's very challenging, and it can be hard for people and timing is key. So the approach we take takes all those factors into consideration. It's primarily led by our Youth Justice Service and one of their teams there, and it can prove to be really beneficial for the young person that's been involved in the incident. It's more positive outcomes, and the likelihood of further incidents or reoffending is significantly reduced by taking that approach. So we find it very beneficial through our local services.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one question to the chair. How do I get rid of this hand on this screen?
Sorry?
How do I get rid of the hand on the...
You should be on the computer, the red one, just press them.
I've done it for you, Councillor, you're all right. I've already done it for you, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think also what's important to highlight here as well is that the good partnership approach that we have in Swansea, and through the additional safeguarding concerns we may have through ASB, is that we've been able to draw down on funding from the violence prevention unit, so that has helped provide evolve with some additional funding for outreach workers, and also someone in the custodial suite, so that if a young person finds himself there, that engagement work can be done immediately on a one-to-one basis. So I think that also highlights actually that the good relationship and working relationships we have here when addressing ASB to try and prevent that escalating into criminal behaviour and activity. So just in, you're on the chair.
Yeah, go on in.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Wonders of teams of a team's environment, so much easier in person. So just in summary for that, what I was trying to demonstrate with those figures, because I suppose I could have, in fairness, Councillor Foggy, I could have broken down those figures into minutiae detail, and I was trying to figure out what is important and what am I trying to represent there. And I suppose what I was trying to show is that, again, that early intervention is important. Once we get to a certain level with dealing with antisocial behaviour, it gets to a certain level, and it's already increasing. There's very little we can do. So it's that early intervention is what I was trying to show with those. And I have not like the side figures to show that. It's just that was the best statistics I could show to give an example of how that does, and how we reduce the amount of escalation that we've got, whether it's adults or child. But we're much more successful with children, because obviously, we can shape children better than we can shape adults' behaviour, because adults' behaviour is generally in the main set in place. It's that old dog new trick kind of thing, I suppose, without generalising it too much. But we have the opportunity with young people to show them the right path rather than the wrong path. Excuse me. Question 8: does the council partner organisation meet its regular obligations in relation to the services represented today? Yes, through a multi-agency approach. I mean, we're very good in Swansea, and I can highlight that, strangely enough, with the PCC phoned me the other week with regards to that multi-agency approach in dealing with ASB. we don't in Swansea deal with antisocial behaviour singularly with any one organisation. I'm reticent to use the word ever, but in my experience, we never have done that over the last 10, 12 years. I look at other areas throughout the UK, and it's still very much prevalent in a lot of areas where they do. The fire service will deal with something, they won't necessarily pass that information onto the local authority or the police service. And that reflects in our community trigger, our ASB case review process, that is part of the legislation and our legislative responsibility, is the fact that Swansea, Wales in particular, have the lowest amount of recorded community trigger applications. Swansea has the lowest in Wales, which is quite, the PCC find that quite astounding, that department, when you look at David Powis and the various other areas we got around, when they do direct comparisons with figures from one area to another. But it's shown in the fact that we start and finish ASB with a partnership approach. We work together from that first phone call to 101 to that last visit by the PCSO when the case has been managed successfully. And case reviews primarily are because there's very little partnership working and things are missed, kind of thing, you know. Because I work within Swansea Central Police Station for majority of my time. That's my office base, if you like, because that's the community safety team. So I work directly with my counterpart from South Wales Police along with the other PCSOs. So we have that direct working relationship with regards to looking at the interventions, how we're dealing with stuff and how we escalate. And again, as I've mentioned before, I work direct, you know, have regular contact with Youth Justice Service. I have regular meetings with the Youth Justice Service to discuss various different cases. Touching on the community trigger, I think I've highlighted in the report that I wanted to take this opportunity to identify that I'm the community trigger coordinator for Swansea. I'm also the antisocial behaviour reduction coordinator for Swansea. And it's very difficult to independently chair a review panel when you're the ASB coordinator that could well have been involved in 95% of those cases in the first place. I've had two recently, and it's the first two I've had in probably 2 or 3 years, whereby one of them I had nothing to do with, which is fantastic, so I could do that. The one I've currently got at the moment, I was actually involved in offering mediation 2 years ago. I've also been down there looking at crime prevention, target hardening stuff with one of the parties, along with my colleagues. So this is one area where I maybe asked for the panel to look at with recommendation-wise how we go forward to having an independent chair in Swansea to deal with community trigger applications. Whether that's an officer, which again, I'm a little bit reluctant to offer up, purely simply because I know what the pressures on a lot of officers are with regards to cutbacks. And, you know, I do 2 jobs at the moment. You know, my role encompasses CCTV as well as antisocial behaviour. But I don't know, but I think it needs to be that little bit higher, you know, councillor level, where you can be truly independent in a particular area. But I don't know. I'm just, I just think that to have an independent chair for a review panel is very important, and to identify somebody that I can go to when I get a community trigger application, that I can turn around and say, right, okay, I'll pull together all of the information, I give it to the chair, I'm therefore support and advice and all of that sort of side of things, but they then analyse the case. They, you know, I'll bring together all the organisations, but they chair it, so they're truly independent. I don't know whether that's something that the panel can look at further down the line, you know, towards the end of part of their recommendations.
We're talking about a lay person really then, are we?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the legislation dictates, so it doesn't dictate, the legislation states it needs to be independent chair, but from experience, they would need some sort of background knowledge of antisocial behaviour and how it's dealt with. But personally, I think if I can provide that knowledge support and sit alongside them, but they actually chair that panel, if that makes sense, because it's going to be quite difficult maybe finding somebody. I mean, I don't know. There may be somebody out there that's got that knowledge, you know.
Sure, there's something that we can discuss at the end of this process. And maybe look at what kind of recommendations, you know, when we put them through to cabinet. Certainly support you on that one. Like we got the governance and audit committee, we've got a lay, what we call a lay chair there. A lay chairwoman, chairman, whatever you want to say. So I can understand where you're coming from on that. So yeah, I'm sure it's something we can look at. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I fetch in Jane again, please? Jane,
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just conscious of the time because it's 3:20. So I was just and I know that a number of us will have to go for different meetings, but just wanted to ask. Obviously, thank you to Paul and Gareth for pulling the report together. Is there any specific questions that you need us to go away? Because this session is really looking at, it's the first session we've had of information gathering, and this is the community safety partnership element of it, and the community safety and integration and the ASB coordination. But is there anything from the panel specifically you need us to go away and look at and come back with more information or any particular questions, if that's okay, Chair? Just to thinking of the timing.
Yeah, well, there's at 4 o'clock there's a scrutiny performance. What's it? Scrutiny working group at 4 o'clock, which quite a few of us are on as well. So I was hoping that we might get through by 3:45. We can move on. I mean, the gentleman has put a huge amount of effort into this meeting, and I really, really appreciate that. You could have been sitting here, really, couldn't you, and just taking the whole thing over, but grateful for the work he's done. And yes, we are looking to finish. We did that. I said 3:30, but it looks like 3:45. And is that all right with yourselves?
Just Chair on that, I've actually got to move my car at 3:30 because
okay.
The guild don't only
we got
three.
Yeah,
we
got 3:30. We have. Sorry, sir.
There was something I haven't missed it, but we often get people, you know, write in, phone in, and make complaints about different people or different departments, and I never see anybody put up, you know, when it gets compliments from members of the public, different departments and different people. That would be nice to see. We introduced it to the Fire Authority about 2 years ago because yes, people complain, but also you get people who compliment as well, and I think that should be put where everybody can see it.
Yeah, we do have I found out last week that we have a compliments department apparently, because I complimented one of our car parking attendants who helped me out and saved my life.
The other week I paid him £25.
Yeah, no, I phoned in and I emailed his boss just to thank him for the service he provided, and apparently there's it's not called there's a compliment.
Yes,
compliments. So that went to the compliments department and held on record for that particular individual. I didn't know it existed before then. Right?
Yeah.
Has anybody got any more questions before we move on then, please? Any more? But we can move on to item 7, which is the working timetable.
I don't need to update.
So
I update panel.
You got the date?
Oh, a minute, let me just.
Yeah.
I'll just update the panel on, just very briefly on that. We have, find the page on my, thank you. Yeah, we got the police coming to the next meeting. We've received a report, which I'll circulate shortly from them, a really detailed report. They'll be coming in person. Hopefully, we can use the Gloucester room to do our hybrid meeting. We have Mark Breyer, Chief Inspector, and Hayley Griffiths coming, and they both work within the ASB part of the police. So that should be able to answer a lot of your questions actually. But they're going to report based on the questions we sent them, and it's very good, quite detailed. So we'll be circulating that shortly.
Okay. And any questions on the work plan? John. For that then we'll come today.
Yeah.
Can I say thank you very much for your attendance? I really appreciate the work that the staff has put in as well. Antisocial behaviour is a big thing, we know. But I also believe that members of the public, should step forward. I know it's not easy to do. We've done it in Blaenau and Portmead, but they have got to, play a major part as well. Members of the public, they see and hear, if you collect the information, pass it on. I'm sure it would make everybody's job a lot easier. With that, thank you very much for attending. I've got to run now to try to get to the meeting with Peter Black to be chairing Scrutiny Programme Committee.
Thank you very much.
Or I'll put apologies.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.